All right. I still see folks are joining the call. Thanks everyone for joining. There is hopefully in the chat link you'll see a link to the meeting minutes. It is a community responsibility to take notes, but please add yourself to the attendance list as well. All right, and the agenda that we have for today is, sorry, now I'm pulling up the meeting minutes. The 1.2 status. It looks like folks are have been adding in the status of the various features. There's also discussing using GitHub issues and milestones to track BOM release cycle. And my goal is to perhaps maybe time box some of these a little bit. So if everyone can give a relatively quick status on 1.2 and a little bit of a discussion around the GitHub issues and milestones bullet, and I'd like to leave a little bit of time for the whole Oracle moving to a Java EE to an open source foundation discussion. I'd like to fit that in, and there's one other bullet, and we'll see if we can get to that one, and that is consistency between microprofile features. Right. So let's see if we can, let's see. Sorry, I thought I'd do one last check here to see how many folks we have on the call.
11.
11, all right. Let's go ahead and get started. Kevin, I don't know if you want to lead off the 1.2 status section, however you want to handle that.
Yeah, I'll just kick this off. There is a link at the top of the agenda there that takes you to the Eclipse Foundation page for each of the components in the overall release. And we kind of need to keep that up to date. I did make entries for all of the pieces that said that they can make MicroProfile 1.2. This is it kind of twofold advantages to this. One is to let the Eclipse Foundation know our plans so that they can kind of plan for when they have to do the IP reviews. So, just to kind of get a general area, but they said, we can update that as we see fit. So that's one advantage. The other one is for any prospective customers that might be coming to the Eclipse site and just looking at, okay, what are their plans? What's the roadmap? What is coming down? And if they at least go to the top level and kind of look at a description, I think that's the main thing that we're looking for each of the components. And I see several of the teams have already done this. So it's just a gentle reminder to go out and ensure that the various components are updated there. So that's all I wanted to do as an overall 1.2 status, and then I think we'll just dive into each of the individual components. Do we just go down the list as it's entered there, John?
I think that's good. You want to go ahead and do roll call down the list?
Metrics, I'm assuming that's Hiko, and I see him on already.
Yes. So we have what we have already is a REST TCK, a spec document that specifies at least the REST API for exposing of metrics. We have JSON and Prometheus format defined for the output part of it. For the implementation of the Java API, so for programmers mostly that want to expose application metrics, we are using basically drop wizard metrics that we have turned into interfaces so that people can use alternative implementations. And we are using some CDI extensions in Magic from Anthony and Stefanutti from Red Hat to make dealing with these APIs easier so that all exists. Java API has been committed to master today. So what's missing? Spec writing of this Java API. But they all both have documentation, especially the CDI extensions that we build on. Java TCK again, tests exist, and I mean, we are not shooting for the 110% thingy here. And then there is some discussion with respect to the representation of units in the API still going on. I favor something pretty simple and homegrown, and there is one community member that has been part of the unit of measurement JSR who is very strongly advocating to use the unit of measurement JSR. And while I'm not married to my implementation, we still need to see how this works and how we can benefit from it. Or yeah.
Okay. Question: when you say the CDI extensions, are you referring to those annotations? That
They do have the so it's the annotations to define a gauge counter and whatnot. They come from Drop Wizard metrics themselves, but Antonin has some ways of injecting interceptors and dealing with the registries and so on. That does not need all this complexity, programming complexity that original Drop Wizard metrics has.
Okay, but then these two approaches are like consistent, or is it
Yes.
like two different programming models?
No. This CDI extensions, one builds on top of the other one. It's I mean,
Okay.
sort of not replacing, but hiding some of the awkwardness of Drop Wizard metrics.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? And okay, dumb question: is it Hiko or Heiko?
Echo.
Heiko. Okay, thank you. I think I mispronounce that every week. Okay. Any other questions for Heiko?
So Heiko, we don't intend to expose any Drop Wizard API from MicroProfile, right? So the whole annotation defined in MicroProfile is to completely hide the Drop Wizard APIs.
Yes and no. So we have turned all these concrete classes into interfaces so that it's possible to use a different implementation in the back. We have also renamed the packages into io.microprofile or eclipse.microprofile.metrics. I forgot which one. So that it's clear that it's between quotes our version of it. But on the other hand, we also wanted to make sure that it's relatively easy to port source code over that uses the classic com.codahail or com.yammer or whatever they have packages into what we have by just exchanging the package. And we were trying to hide some of this, how to set it up, which I think is pretty awkward behind these CDI extensions, which make it a lot easier.
So I'd like to make a recommendation just in the interest of time. Let's see if we can keep this section on an ongoing basis, right, across all meetings as a status kind of review. And then we can maybe discuss a little bit deeper, either if we have time after the status or offline in the threads. And I know that there's various teams also have their various hangouts as well, right? So I just want to be a little bit wary. Yeah, I just want to be just a little bit wary of time here.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so we'll just let each team speak to their status, and then we'll move on, unless there's major concerns. Is that the idea, John?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next item is the config 1.1 update, and I think that's John.
Yep, I'm here. So I didn't put together a slide deck, but right now this is looking pretty small. There's 5 issues complete. All of them were minor fixes to either TCK or spec wording, no functional changes, except for the property names, which was requested by Pyara. That is in, I'm not seeing any usage, but I can see like SPI changes or maybe integrators needing it. So definitely some benefit there. The last one is an open issue with how blank values are being treated, which so far is inconsistent between the two implementations I've looked at. I haven't looked at any of the other impls. But I'm hoping to just get that wrapped up this week. I think we're in alignment right now on what that test is supposed to be doing. So there's 3 versions of that test currently, one for a CDI bean, one for a property-based file, and one for a system property. All that is in, and hopefully that just gets merged in, and we should be able to get that wrapped in this week.
Okay, good. Okay.
I'm hoping to get all the paperwork filled out as well this week. I started on it late last week, but didn't get much time. A lot of paperwork.
Yep. So are you still being held up then with requiring other people to merge your changes?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Emily had made a comment in one of them. I didn't understand the comment. She clarified that, so I was able to get an update in this morning, at least this morning my time.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I'm a committer, so I can push. It was just someone had an issue with it, so I wanted to make sure it was being addressed.
Okay. Okay. Emily, fault tolerance?
Yeah, so it's basically it's Antoine, John, and I have been worked together to finalize the API. And since it's because of holiday season in the last few weeks, so we concentrated to get a TCP written. So basically in the repo, we have an API and the stack and pretty written, all written up, all synced up, and then we have TCK as well. So last night with Kevin's help, because Kevin has a Mac, I don't have, so can run the release script. So we created the first the release candidate for tolerance. So I talked to John and Antoine. So we will review it, and this is Thursday. This Wednesday during our hangout, we will just go through all the remaining issues. And there's one area TCK need to be added. So I think we are pretty much ready. So just need to get together after the break and look at all the API, look at the stack and sync to make sure it's all synced up. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, good. Okay, Scott, are you on for JWT?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay, good.
So we're having a final discussion this week to determine exactly what the CDI behaviors are going to be in terms of injection types requirements. Then we'll do a proposed final release this week. In progress updating the Eclipse release information and then expanding the TCK to cover the current topics that are and features that are outlined in the updated spec.
Okay, good. Sounds like good progress.
And I'll talk to the health check as well, because I know Heiko is not on, and we just had a meeting this morning to try and get that moving forward. So we basically there's 3 major issues in the 1.0 release plan, the milestone, and so we had a discussion on those and basically made some decisions on the health entry point / health as the root entry point. Some updates to the APIs, exactly what the structure looks like. We made a decision that we're going to push in to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to what the current proposal is and iterate on that to finalize that this week. And then in terms of security, the main issue, I guess, is really the machine-to-machine communication and whether or not that can actually be configured. So what we kind of decided there is what we're going to do is not have a payload by default if it's not secured, because that's the expected typical cloud environment use case, and then have an ability to allow someone to configure a payload as not containing sensitive information if they want that exposed without a secured context. Other words, to get a payload, you need a secured context is what we're going to move forward as the proposal for security recommendations or requirements. Then this TCK that needs to be updated to reflect the current changes. We're going to put out our release candidate by the end of the week and start on the Eclipse release info as well.
Okay. I know the one thing that, just as a general comment to everybody, when we did the MicroProfile 1.1 release with config 1.0, it turned out that the review that we do with Eclipse, all of our individual features or components have to request a review, but it turns out that it really gets covered because of the whole MicroProfile review, because they pull all the code from our repos in order to do a review. So even though everyone's going to be requesting one, Eclipse ends up doing the whole thing all at once anyway. So just for your awareness.
So Kevin, further on that, shall we, submit for Eclipse review at the same time, say like this week, sometime this week? So because Eclipse will do the whole thing, together.
Yeah, now I don't remember their exact schedule, so we'll have to check on that and find out what date we should be submitting that on. I know, they only do reviews certain times during the month. So
Yeah,
Emily, why don't we take that offline and figure out the right timing for doing that?
Yeah, okay. We'll talk offline.
Yep, thank you. Okay. Anything else related to the MicroProfile 1.2 release that anyone wanted to bring up?
So what exactly are the requirements for this release information? We have overview, issues, release plan, and review information. What if we just follow what fault tolerance does? Is that good? But it's not all filled out yet, so I'm not sure what the scope of these issues are.
Yeah, actually, the issues, I don't know that really has to be filled out at all because we're not using the Eclipse bug tracker stuff.
Okay.
And the main thing is the description up front. And if there's other parts of that release plan that you want to fill out just for your own usage, you can do it. But the main thing is the top level description.
Okay.
And then, of course, the other thing is to schedule a review. And that's what Emily and I just talked about, that we got to figure out the right timing for that.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question specific to fault tolerance, perhaps. It could be that we defer this discussion till tomorrow. But I'm a little concerned that what we're introducing in fault tolerance is a duplication of what's already in config and seems to represent a lot of behavior that we already have in there. So support for system properties as well as environment variables. That's stuff that we should be able to pull from config, and it seems very disconnected to me right now that we basically have two specs that are both relying on the same thing versus one spec saying it's going to integrate with the other.
Maybe we can further discussion. So the only thing is that in the first release, I propose to use the system property is because we want to time box it. If we say it's the kind of way we treat all property as config properties, that will add a lot of TCK and etc. And then because the system property is kind of default configuration, the properties, so it's in the next release we easily just expand to be a proper property.
Right, and I understand that. The issue that I see, though, is we're going to have to support that functionality for some period of time beyond the first release. or otherwise we're going to tell users that there's a migration path where you basically lose what you had been doing in the first version.
They wouldn't lose anything. They have to do. Basically, in the first release, like in the first release, is kind of they have to specify as a system property. In the following release, you can either specify this as system property or any configuration files in any configuration files. So what in the first release is should still working further down the line. We can have a further discussion, John, tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can make it to tomorrow's discussion. The Wednesday morning sessions have been a little bit hard for me, so.
Right. Okay.
Let me see what I can do if I can clear up that slot.
Right. Okay. Let's talk offline. You suggest some. If you cannot make it, suggest a different time, and then Antoine and I will have a look to whether we can. Reschedule it.
Okay.
With respect to this IP review, so it's basically, did I understand correctly? I just fill in the description on the link that I just pasted, and I'm done, and they pull it and they do the magic by themselves. I understood I have to submit some issues into IPzilla and saying if this is a library we use to compile or to test and all these things.
Yeah, so there should be, well, okay, so when Emily and I figure out the proper timing for this, then we can send out more information, but there should be a button that we end up creating or clicking that says, yeah, on the right-hand side, there's one that says to create, nope, that wasn't it. That was create a contribution questionnaire. And that's what we end up doing, that ends up creating an item in their IPzilla. Okay, so I know I documented this a little bit when I went through it with MicroProfile 1.0 and 1.1, but I need to revisit it and make sure that it's still consistent with the way that we're going forward. But that's what each of the components would need to do. You see that on the right?
Okay. Yeah, now I see it, right. I was not logged in, and when you talked about description, I thought, okay, that's easy, just filling a little bit of text, blah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, but
you have to be logged in because it's a committer tool, and
yeah,
it's
of course.
Okay, yeah, we'll make sure that we have better instructions for that as we go forward here, once we figure out the proper date.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay. John, I think we're done with that part of the agenda.
Take myself off of mute? Yeah, I had to take myself off of mute. So I guess it sounds like everyone's on track towards delivering towards MicroProfile 1.2, which is awesome. The next topic is, sorry, I'm pulling up the notes here. And don't forget to add any notes in to the MicroProfile status feature status that you think are relevant. So I just took one on the alignment of config and a note on the alignment of config and fault tolerance. So if you saw any other ones, please add notes. Okay, somebody added. I think in the future, if we could put names next to the items, it might be a little bit easier. I'm guilty of that myself, by the way. Somebody brought up discuss using GitHub issues and milestones to track BOM release cycle. John Ahmet. So you want to just describe that a little bit, John, and we can have a short discussion?
Actually, could I share my screen?
Yes, you can. If you just hit the share screen, everyone should be able to see it.
All right. Oh boy, now let's add an extension. Okay. Cool.
And
All right.
okay, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah, so everyone sees the config
Yep.
repo on my screen. So what I'm proposing out there is we try to model what we've been doing in the other projects as how we actually manage the BOM, rather than email threads and these long lists of what's in, what's out, just because it gets very confusing and very hard to follow. So if I were to go into GitHub issues, I'm going to see milestones, which is similar to what you see in most issue trackers around a release. And we've seen a lot, I think some amount of usefulness where we created the config 1.0 with the 39 closed issues as a way to track everything that was going to be released in config 1.0. It's 100% complete, and we actually see the full list of issues that are included in here as a way to automate things like release notes and verify everything's actually in the release that we were expecting to be in there. If I go back, I now also have a milestone for 1.1, which has the list of issues that are open and closed in here. And what I was kind of hoping is we could apply this model to what we're doing in the BOM to track things like, is the config 1.1 in, is fault tolerance 1.0 in, JOT, health checks, et cetera, all in that release. So basically create an issue in the BOM issue tracker to represent the fact that we want to add config 1.1 or fault tolerance 1.0 or fault tolerance 1.1 to a specific version of MicroProfile BOM.
I like that, John.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And so what I can do is I can take an action item to create the versions in the BOM repository as a milestone. And I'll create issues right now for everything that we know is in. When someone wants to add something new, they would create a new issue and simply raise a pull request against that issue so that we know what's actually going into the BOM.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And I will stop sharing.
Okay. Next topic is going to be an interesting one. I brought this up. The MicroProfile and Oracle moving Java EE to an open source foundation. So hopefully everyone has heard that Oracle plans to move Java EE to an open source foundation. It was announced late last week, I think it was Thursday, and there's been various articles on it. There's a blog on, the Aquarium, which is the old Glassfish blog, that kind of announces it. There's an interesting, I also encourage everyone to take a look at the D-Zone article where David Delabasi was interviewed, because it gives a little bit more detail than what's actually in the blog. So what this means, according to that D-Zone article, is that they plan on moving the Glassfish RI over. They plan to move, to the best of their ability, right? TCK was there, the specifications, and I'm sure I'm missing something as well, right? So it's a good article that provides a little bit more detail if you haven't seen it. Now, it's my understanding that, oh, thank you. So there was also an EC meeting, I believe, yesterday, I think, and notes will be posted from that, I think, as they always are. Does anyone want to comment on some of the...
It wasn't an EC meeting. It was just a conference call amongst that the EC members could join, as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Thanks for bringing that up. So I guess, My question is actually fairly broad. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts about the actual open sourcing of Java EE and just general questions about that, or MicroProfile, right? And what MicroProfile means for that. And to start the discussion, I think one thing I'll bring up is that we've got a pretty good roadmap, right, within MicroProfile, as we kind of saw in the status today. So from my perspective, we need to keep executing on the MicroProfile roadmap, because that's what I think the Java EE community wants. And from a vendor perspective, right, that's what customers want, because they want this functionality. And it's going to take time for this whole open sourcing to actually happen. How much time is TBD, right? But it as we found out with MicroProfile, right, it takes time. So down the road, it's TBD. Go ahead, Mark.
I've been on the phone call on Friday with David Delabassi and Oracle folks, Will, up front to the publication of this stuff. David Blevins was there as well, and Ivor Grimstead and Martin Fairburg. Mm-hmm. And we
sorry, Mark. I apologize. I apologize for interrupting. Was that an NDA call, or was it a call where you could share this information?
Was not.
Okay.
I asked David if we can share this information, and so we are free to share this information. And okay. They want to open source the TCK. Not quite sure if that TCK means the single TCKs of the specs, but I assume so, and not only the E umbrella TCK. But they and the Glassfish implementation and part projects, but not the specs. They should continue to be JSR managed, and it will not happen before E9. So E9 will probably be the first one. E8 will continue. They finish E8, and then they are looking into how they can move this stuff to an open source foundation. And they did not yet decide which open source foundation they want to pick. So that's it, basically. There are a few things which they don't like to give up the Java trademark, so they also like to get. Yeah, the problem is they currently hold the Java Enterprise trademark, or Java EE, and this contains the term Java, so they want to name this new thing, which they want to move to an open source foundation, somehow different. Not quite sure how this should work out, but that's the only thing which is probably left for them. They sounded really like they want to do this, and they have the backing of the management, it seems.
Thanks, Mark. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a slight clarification on that. So did you say that their target is currently to do this after Java E8, so that Java E9 will be done within the open source foundation, or after Java EE9?
Mike, haven't you been on the call as well?
No.
Oh, okay. It might include Java E9 already, depending on how fast they can move it. So that makes me think that the 1 year time frame they give themselves for publishing Java E9 might be a bit deep goal. So I don't think they will make it in 1 year E9.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of color.
Separate from us.
Yeah, it's definitely after Java EE8, right? So any work that begins on Java EE9 would be in the context of an open source foundation, right? I've been pretty public about my thoughts about Java EE9. I think a lot of folks liked what they saw in terms of the contents of Java EE9. in what they proposed last Java 1, but the time frame was extremely aggressive. And when you add this in, it's even,
It just won't work out.
Yeah, it makes it that much harder, right? So as a Java EE community, right, we all have our, a foot in multiple well, we have more than 2 feet because we're probably in more than 2 communities, but right, we have a foot in MicroProfile community, we have a foot in the Java EE community, right? Some might also have a foot in the Java Guardians community and so on, right? So I think as all of us are going to kind of have to work together and understand, with great freedom comes great responsibility. We're going to have to figure out as a community how Java EE evolves, right? Within the community, within this open source foundation, and that's going to be a collaborative effort. So, what I like about MicroProfile is that we've been kind of addressing it from an open source perspective, right? But we've also been focusing a little bit more on iteration and trying to move a little bit more quickly than the traditional Java EE. And so, within an open source foundation, I would like to somehow also see that, that there's a way to have a way to deliver technologies in the hands of developers more quickly, but then there's also, the standardization process that has traditionally happened. We'll have to figure out what happens with that aspect. So anyway, I've been talking a little bit. Are there other comments? Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess there's all kinds of questions. I mean, exactly what does that mean in terms of the TCKs and how implementations are certified? The trademark issue is, is Oracle still going to have some kind of branding or certification independent of the TCK? There's a lot of uncertainty around that aspect of it.
Oh, there's a lot of questions.
What we specifically asked is all the specs contain the JavaX page package name. So if they don't want to allow anyone the Java trademark to use the Java trademark, then this would include the JavaX package names. And we all agree, I guess, that we cannot simply change this for Java EE. And David and Will took this back to the legal team. So there are a lot of open questions from this aspect. But they look really, they try to really get it done. That was the feeling overall.
Well, I agree with that, Mark. It does seem like they are very interested in doing this and doing it as quickly as they can. I know I read somewhere, I don't know which blog post, but they want to pick a foundation before Java 1. And so if they pick it, I think they want to show progress before Java 1. And so I think they're enticed to do this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think as a community, as members of the community, right, Java community, we should, help grease the skids at least as much we can. And some of that is by bringing up some of these issues as early as possible, right? Which has already started to happen, right? Like around the JavaX namespace, and I saw the brand issue, whether it's the top level brand or Java Servlet, right? Is another example of where Java is used, right? And enterprise Java beans. I mean, going down the list, right? So, let's see if we can bring up all these issues as we think of them. Maybe we can do it, in the context of a thread for now in a Google group. Take in my opinion, I've worked with some of these people directly, right, when I was at Oracle on a day-to-day basis, and I agree with Mark that this is a positive move with a lot of well-intentioned people, and so let's continue to work as much as we can to bring up issues early.
Well, so there is going to be a face-to-face meeting of the EC just before Java 1 that Mark Little will be at. So I think certainly we should have a list of issues that is a agenda item for that. Several of us are EC members and we'll be at that meeting, so we should certainly have those issues brought up there as a major agenda item. Because again, as someone who spent a lot of time trying to do revision of the Java community process and the JSRs and the underlying IP flow, that was still a long outstanding issue. It seems a bit strange that this is going to get thrown over the fence without really addressing that problem. So I think that's the major concern is, okay, great, but how are you going to get that done given that we couldn't make any progress for 10 years on, how the JCP
I'm actually
works.
a bit surprised that IBM and Red Hat wasn't informed upfront, it seems.
Well, I think there might have been some back channel stuff. It's just that I think that they were allowed to take the lead, but there still certainly is, as far as I know, real discussion of how IP flow, because it's a very different model. It's hugely different model how IP flows in normal open source projects and communities versus how the JCP and the JSPA behave, and that's what we've been talking about and arguing about for years now. So I think I still have a lot of uncertainty there just because of that history.
Well, they don't want to move the specs to an open source foundation, just the TCK and the reference implementation. I'm not quite sure how the differentiation and the split between the TCK and the specs will work out in practice. But that's what they said. The specs will remain.
Yeah.
We asked them this.
Well, there's nuances there. There are nuances there, right? The intent is they would like to be able to do that and let us evolve the specifications. I think there's now keep in mind there's the intent of of the folks that would like to do this, and then there's lawyers, right? Who are trying to. Well, no, I agree with you, right? But I agree with you entirely, right? And the lawyers are trying to protect the company, right? So, and that's true of any organization. And so, they would like to be able to do that, but I think we need to work with them and figure out, a path for that to happen in some way, right? There'll have to be some kind of strategy built around it. It sounds like there was a pause there, so I'm going to take that unless there's any last minute thoughts before we go on to the last topic.
Well, I actually think the last topic dovetails into this because let's say Eclipse is the target foundation. Then some of the behaviors and the way that we're managing MicroProfile could certainly be leveraged to help with the Java EE as well, or whatever enterprise something this is going to be called. But in that regard, the issue that I'm seeing is now that we're putting together multiple features, there are a number of issues coming up in terms of how there is consistency between the feature sets in terms of all kinds of aspects, from TCKs to releases to how features cross-reference each other, as John brought up. If there's a configuration aspect, how does that get delegated to a configuration API, etc. I think that's just something we're going to have to figure out and have an iteration. Is there something like, again, the bombs fit in here? Is there something like an umbrella discussion that's helping these features fit together and all that is something we need to start talking about and understand between the feature authors and people participating in cross features.
Yeah, Scott, I think we're definitely missing that part of it. Right now, we are just kind of looking at the individual specs, and then we assume that each one's doing their own piece of work, and then we're just bringing them in under the umbrella. But then you get back to the Java EE platform, and that was the idea of the platform spec, was to kind of ensure consistency across all the other specs. And probably getting to that point where we need to consider that there's more of a microprofile platform spec to ensure this consistency.
Yeah, and I mean, as a concrete thing, one issue I have with the way our TCKs are done right now is because we don't have a reference implementation for each feature, it's a little more difficult to describe. Well, what I'd like to see is, so for example, Mark and John has referenced the CDI TCK as the example for how the config and others have been done. But the difference there is that they have a reference implementation. They give a concrete example of how do I run that TCK, for example, I mean, I would just like to, out of the box, be able to run a TCK on a given implementation, as opposed to having to pull so many things together is what I'm looking for.
I'm not quite sure if this really plays out that well, or if it is that important. The reference implementation for CDI is a good point, because sometimes EvenWeld has bugs and OpenWebMins has different bugs. They behave a bit different. We have non-specified features, and if you have one reference implementation and you don't have multiple implementations which really test against the TCK and improve the TCK with each other, then you run into the situation that the reference implementation has some weird behavior, and this becomes the standard because it's the reference implementation. If I'm looking at some, not talking about CDI because Weld is really good, but there are other reference implementations which just don't have the level to be used in production. So there are different, for some specs, there is a reference implementation, which is the worst implementation on the planet. And
Right.
There are other open source implementations which are much better. So I'm not quite sure if it's that important to have one reference implementation.
Yeah, no, that's not the point.
Should be the TCK itself.
Yeah, but the point is being able to get up and running, and the other issue related to that is I would really like a way to capture what the existing implementations of a given spec are. And so one way we could do that is by having profiles associated with the TCK that says this is how this implementation was run to pass the TCK. And that's really what I would like to get to is, is there a way that we can capture that so that makes it easy for people to look at the implementations and how they were run and really understand, so we can start doing this comparison across implementations, in terms of improving the overall behaviors.
I think
Kind of
for the
along
open
the lines
source
of what we have for
implementation.
the conference app.
Now, in the config, we have links to the implementations, and you can just go through the implementations, check them out, and let them run. And they run the TCKs out of the box.
I thought I just went through that and I did not see that. Is that not in the run, how to run a TCK, or is it someplace else?
It's automatically executed. So if you do Maven clean install in the root, the TCK is automatically getting executed. It's just pretty fast because it are 50 tests and implementations are fast.
How do you do that with things like, let's say, WebSphere Liberty, which is not open source, which you just can't download, like, let's say, Wildfly and test? I mean, the implementation has to run in a concrete server and not as an isolated Java standalone binary, right?
Sure, but that's not the problem of the Commons config, the config stuff.
It's basically,
you will always have.
Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, it's for running a particular implementation. We have another separate integration layer to get the container pulled in to be able to run the TCK. And for marks, that implementation in the Geronimo config as a different setup. So every different container will have a different setup. I think it's for Wildfly, again, you will need to pull in the Wildfly container to run the TCK as well. So we have the setup for running all the TCK, like a config fault tolerance from a Liberty perspective.
Okay, I'll look at that. So that is what I'm looking for, is that we have that ability, and then that we're documenting that as the way that we approach it across all of our features, so that there's just consistency, and users and implementers understand what the steps are.
I think this is the current, it's the same situation with all closed source servers. With open source servers, you can check out how the TCK is integrated. With closed servers, you cannot. So if you look at JS or WebSphere, IBM says they run the TCK, and we have to take this. That's it, and I trust them.
But then I don't completely understand why the TCK would need to, let's say, support these servers, or running them, or running the stuff in them or against them. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but I guess I'm just missing a point here.
The point is, for us currently, is not so far as a legal problem in making those servers be able to name themselves MicroProfile compatible, but it's from a user aspect. We run the TCKs against those servers that the users are compatible. They can move between one server to another server, and they can use the same programming model. It's in the container vendor's interest to pass the TCK for their users. That's the main point of the TCK, in my opinion. It's for Java EE, it's that you get the stamp, your Java EE certified, and then you call this to the big slides. The main point is for the users.
Okay, so I think now I'm getting to it. So I understood that the makers of a spec like health check or fault tolerance would need to ensure that the TCK runs against all these servers, but you are sort of reversing that and saying, okay, it's the duty of the server vendor maker to run it, and then that's probably what Scott is saying, contributing the way of starting that and running it to the general TCK so that it's available for everyone, even if they don't have, if the feature group does not have the server at hand to really try it by themselves.
Yes, and also if the vendor finds something which is just broken in the TCK, some failure in the TCK, or some overly eager assumption, then I guess they will report this to the team, and then the TCK gets improved.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just going to add one thing, John, quickly. Is I guess from my perspective, for me, that kind of leaves a bit of a grey area in the sense of if you have a situation where we have a TCK for fault tolerance config, whatever, you have two vendors with separate implementations of that. One says they've got a bug in the TCK, and the other one says they don't have that problem. Then, like who's right? Because at least with a single RI, it's easy to go, oh, it's a bug in the TCK or it's a bug in the RI. But if you've got two different vendors saying that one saying my implementation works with the TCK and another one saying that theirs doesn't, is that a bug in the implementation or the TCK or even both? It's how do we solve those?
Then look at CDI again. CDI had a really great TCK, but still, when testing or running this TCK against open web beans, we found quite a few actual bugs and misinterpretation and overreaching interpretations which the specend doesn't give. And we challenged this, created TCK tickets, and we fixed this together with the community. And the end result was that the spec became much better, the TCK became much better, and the implementations became much better. The way to go is just create a ticket against the TCK, and then, or the spec, if it's something is not clear in the spec, and then clarify this in a +1 version.
Yeah, we've done that quite often, with other JSRs too. Well, Mark, you're very familiar with OpenJPA. We got to do that with Eclipse Link all the time. I mean, not all the time, but things pop up, and we just have to continue to work through it until we figure out, okay, what was wrong? Was the spec not clear enough, or was the RI or the TCK?
Or sometimes the wording in the spec is just not good for customer projects. So they define something which is just in practice not practicable, and then we have to fix it. That's it. Specs are not perfect. TCKs are not perfect, but with every time we stumble across such things, we make them better.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation is between the spec and the TCK being both open source with their own issue tracking, you should be able to hammer down the behavior across implementations, right?
Should be.
If not, then it's, well, a problem. Then it should be tested.
So I apologize. I do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. I just added a couple of notes into our meeting minutes. Please feel free to do so. This meeting is being recorded, and I'll push it up to the MicroProfile YouTube page once it's kind of rendered by Blue Jeans. All right, so probably by tomorrow it should be up on YouTube. All right.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye.
Yep. No problem. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.